Master the business of speaking with your hosts, Taylor and Austin. You're listening to Technically Speaking.
Welcome to another episode of Technically Speaking. We're your hosts, Taylor and Austin, and in today's episode, we're talking with renowned hypnotist and peak performance expert, Wayne Lee. Wayne's own journey to excellence has been fueled with an unrelenting passion for empowering people. From a childhood fascination with magic and visualization, Wayne's gift and passion for seeing great potential and acting on it have allowed him to grow his career and perform to audiences worldwide. And that's exactly why we're talking today about how to remove the self-limiting, subconscious barriers getting in the way of bringing your business and your life to the next level. Join us as we talk about the different strategies and tactics we have at our disposal to change the course of our business and life through the power of removing those limiting beliefs. As always, stick around to the end for some amazing resources, and we hope you enjoy this one. All right, everyone, we are live. Wayne, welcome to the show, my friend. I feel like this has been a long time in the making.
Oh my goodness, time flies, and it's so good to see you guys and be back and be conversing here for sure.
Yeah, the last time we saw you in person we saw you, period, really, for me at least, was in person before the world had completely turned. So it's good to see you again.
Yeah, always good.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
So Wayne, I'm curious. We always just like to kick off with a backstory, especially for the listeners who may not know you personally. Like, how did you end up into the speaking space, and what has your journey been like so far? Like, how did you get where you are today?
Well, when I tell people, they don't usually believe me because for the last 25 years, I've been hypnotizing people to do all sorts of things in regards to funny things, but helping people achieve their goals. But I never set out to intentionally become a hypnotist. I actually was a school teacher and was always fascinated with the power of the mind and the power of the imagination. I think I was a pretty imaginative kid when I was young. And my parents always supported me, just do what you want to do. And so part of it, I was becoming a school teacher. And one night I was out at a nightclub watching a hypnosis show. I don't know if you guys have seen the hypnosis show, but I'll tell you what, I was young. I was doing my teacher training, and I'm watching this fellow get all these people on stage do some like crazy, hilarious things in a nightclub. So you could imagine that it was a little bit more adult material. And part of me is going like, this is unbelievable. Like, this is so powerful, like a puppet master getting these people to dance on cue, not get out of their seats, you name it. It was happening. And so part of me was in disbelief, like, that's not real. And I was there with my girlfriend at the time, and I'm laughing my head off. And it wasn't until he gave a suggestion where he had everybody think they had lost their belly buttons that it became really real for me, because people on stage were looking for their belly buttons. And it was like they were in shock, but you knew that their belly buttons were right there. And I look over at my girlfriend, and there she was looking for her belly button. So she got hypnotized right beside me. And obviously I brought her, so she wasn't paid to do this. And there was something in that moment that was like a turning point of fascination, of obsession, that if this is real, like, how does this all work? Now, the backstory to that is that one of my great loves in life was the sport of amateur wrestling. So what I knew from amateur wrestling is I wasn't that great of an athlete. I got beat up when I got in the sport, had a great coach, great trainers. And one of the things that my coach instilled in me was the power of visualization and the power of burning that into your mind and creating that as an intention. And that always served me well. I became a 3-time Canadian amateur wrestling champion. My goal was actually to make the Olympics, had a very serious neck injury. And through visualization, I also healed my neck. So transfer that to seeing this up on stage, this spectacle of what was happening. I was in awe. So at the time, I studied everything I could. I watched videos. It was a time where now that I present to student groups, I say, I went to a place called the library where they had books.
What's that?
What is that?
Like early 90s, there was no internet, right?
Yeah.
So I would actually be in a trance, like reading this stuff. 8 hours would go by, and I was just like fixated on it. I was transfixed. And then lo and behold, I studied and found out that hypnosis is really the power of suggestion for people to change their action or their behavior. And I thought, well, if that's true, we're hypnotizing ourselves every day in life. And it's so true. It's really the art and science of suggestion to influence others or program yourself. And a lot of people just see that it's so phenomenal, but we also see people in the world that we just shake our head like, how did they buy into that belief? So most of our programming comes from, now I'm getting into a little bit of the teaching and how it all works. But after hypnotizing hundreds of thousands of people, very proud to say only 3 people have never woken up.
Okay. All right.
Actually, here's the spiel: is that although it appears that I'm putting people to sleep on stage, I'm actually waking them up.
Yeah.
So most people are a slave to their fear and their inhibitions and their self-imposed limitations. So getting people to snap out of that is been my journey. To finish the loop on the story, though, I had watched a lot of motivational speakers. I was always very much inspired by the greats like Jim Rohn and philosophy and spirituality. So I always had that as a guiding force, not just to go out there and do shows that were funny, but I also knew that being funny and entertaining was the greatest way to teach others, was to get people actually to let go of their own resistance so they're open to new ideas. And that's ultimately hypnosis. So my goal from the get-go when I left teaching and I became a full-time entertainer and speaker was to, I call it the 3 E's, was to entertain, educate, and empower. And empower wasn't me indoctrinating people. It was me showing people how they had that within themselves and they had to own it. And so that's a large part of the self-imposed limitations, that a lot of people don't believe they can do it, or they don't believe that they're good enough, or they don't believe that they have the inherent abilities. And so that's always served me well, no matter what avenue or what platform or what stage I was on. It was always a guiding force to entertain, educate, and empower. Whether I was even in a nightclub doing some, funny adult shows, there was always an inspirational edge to it. And people say, that was great, I laughed my head off. Yet that thing you did at the end where you stood on a person thinking that they were a piece of steel, like that blew my mind. And they take away that just one thing that can help them move forward, whether it's inspiration or a tool of how they can focus their mind better. So as you can tell, you probably read my passion right now, that it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah. Wow. What a crazy journey to be on. I love that. You came at it sort of from like this dual practical and passionate sense. Like you saw that there was a pragmatic way to use this as a tool to improve your life, but you also loved it. And so those two things seem to have been married for you, which I don't think a lot of people are able to do really. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And one of the things, and I have to say, as we were talking before about like making a promise to yourself and a commitment, when I was in the sport of amateur wrestling, there was something, I call it the why. The why is an acronym for Wonderful Heart's Yearning. Sometimes you don't know why you're doing it, but there's if you just love it, you do it. And for whatever reason, I fell in love with the sport of wrestling. Maybe I love winning. Maybe I love the competition. Maybe I love the tech, whatever it was, there was a love there. And so I remember in grade 9, actually, I said to myself, whatever I was going to do later on in life, I need to love it like I love this sport. And so that was a guide. So I think I was blessed in the sense that I recognized that and I let that be the guiding force in my life. Because even teaching, like when people said, well, if this doesn't work out, entertaining and motivating, you can always go back to teaching. That wasn't even a part of my makeup. I burned the boats. It was like, no, I'm going to do this. So, and it reinforced intentionality in regards to when you really put your mind to something, like really put your mind, it's just not talk, but it's a full on commitment. The universe will support you. It'll conspire. You'll find the people, places, things, events, opportunities as if by magic, but the magic is you owning it. Right. So,
yeah. Well, I mean,
it hasn't always been easy. Trust me, there's been some major challenges that I've had to pivot with, but I never wished it to be easy. I just knew that following my dream, you're going to probably hit more obstacles, because if not, you're probably hiding behind a wall to some sense.
That's true. Yeah, I love everything that you're saying. Okay, so I'm super curious. I think,
Austin, I got to tell you, even when people don't love what I'm saying, I hypnotize them to believe everything that they get.
Yeah. Hey, you pulled a magical stunt before we got recording here, helping me recall some memories. So yeah, I believe that that's true.
Yeah.
So I can totally see the benefit, obviously, to everything that you're talking about here. And I think that anybody that listens to you obviously will. But I also know that there's maybe a hesitancy, let's say, for some people to to even consider a lot of this stuff, and especially as it relates to like the hypnosis piece. I mean, I think there's a lot of people don't even have a box for what that looks like, and because the unknown is frightening, I imagine that there are people that have some hesitancy there. So from your perspective, having worked with as many people as you have, do you run into that regularly where people are very skeptical or hesitant about the participatory experience for how you do what you do?
For sure. And that's one of the great loves of being able to educate people on that. So then by the end of it, they've seen it in a different way. My goal is not for people to buy into hypnosis and believe it, because ultimately most of the perceptions of what it is, really, it's not. So for me to dial it down, but there's so many common myths about it. And I guess a lot of stereotypes because of the movies and how people have presented it, that I get that a lot of times. So I'll walk into an event and I'll shake somebody's hand saying, "Hey, I'm Wayne Lee, the hypnotist." And this is what they do. "Don't look at me, get away."
You're going to hypnotize me.
Yeah. So I play with it all the time in terms of, just even what I said about, out of hundreds of thousands of people, only 3 people have never woken up. It's a joke that I'm poking fun at, that, it gives me a chance to re-educate people on what it is. And when people realize that, when they say to themselves, "It's hard to get up in the morning, I'm not a morning person, I'll never be able to do it," when they realize that that's just as much as a hypnotic command that they're giving themselves than that I'm giving on stage, then that's where the magic comes in, the awakening comes in, because they're like, the power of their words to either propel them and use their full potential, or to paralyze them and stop them. So that's what really gets me going. And the participation is, I know that when I walk into a room and I can excite and I can inspire people, it's a challenge for me. And then when they buy into it, they realize, wow, there's some benefits to this. Like 1 hour of hypnosis feels like a great sleep. And that, when people aren't dancing in life, the metaphor is that it's not that they can't dance. Everybody can dance to some sense, some sort of getting up there and moving, but most people are afraid of what other people are thinking of them. And so when you see somebody transform from, "No, I'm not going to dance up here," to becoming, like, without hesitation, doing the hippie shake on command like that, it's like you've got it within you. The only thing that was stopping you is that self-talk that is the hypnotic command that you're giving yourself at an unconscious level, because most of our behaviors are driven by our habits, and our habits are all stored in our subconscious, and our habits are a product of our beliefs over and over and over.
Wow.
Hopefully that wasn't too much for you.
No, that makes perfect
awesome.
sense. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of this ties into your kind of like one of your core value propositions, right? Which is peak performance. So were you always on the hunt for helping people hit their peak performance, or did you start with just like the hypnosis thing that you were fascinated by, and then kind of connected the dots rather, that this could impact people's peak performance? Like, how did those two things line up for you in your journey?
Yeah, no, great question. First of all, me coming from the athletic background that I had in wrestling, it was inevitable for me to work with athletes, to work with people to better their performance. I was always, looking and on the hunt for success. And when the intersection of hypnosis came into me seeing one of the most amazing entertainers, this hypnotist that I'd seen that inspired me, I just knew, the ability to make people laugh, and at the back knowing that there's this inspiration. And over years, it took years to really dissect it and understand how to deliver it and how to articulate it. Yet it was always about, and I think the messaging changed in regards to how I was saying it, like through the branding and that, but it was always about, how do you perform better? And ultimately, even back in the early days, it was about, getting these people to perform on stage. All performance first starts in programming, or it's preceded by programming. And programming is all what you're saying to yourself, what you're picturing in your mind's eye, and ultimately that drives all behavior. So I think from the early get-go, it was always a motivation for me to be doing that. And now even like the movement that I've created called the Transform movement, it's a play on the word transform. It's TRANCE. That's just another extension of what I'm doing. Is like, I say that all transformation happens in trance. And what I mean by that is that people are swimming in their own self-imposed limitations, and they actually believe that's who they are. And I say that's just a borrowed belief that you've picked up from somebody else or society, no fault of yours. And when you realize that you have to actually get into a trance, like relax your mind and distance yourself from that thought, then you realize that you become the thinker of that thought. You're much more than that thought. It's beyond belief. And then how does that translate in performance? Well, today we've got more technology, more strategies to know how to do something. It's not about doing another doing strategy. It's about taking action on what we know to be true and moving forward with it. And that's performance. And a lot of people are waiting for the how. Well, I need to know how to do this. I need to. No, you don't. It starts with the dream. It starts with the vision. And then that intention, that commitment, that promise will then start to open up this portal, this door of infinite possibilities. Now, that sounds a little metaphysical. You can tell that I love that aspect of what I do.
Sure.
Yet on the practicality side, doesn't matter if it's a corporation, doesn't matter if it's a mom or a dad. The problem is never the problem. It's the thinking that's the problem.
Wow. I feel like you just unlocked something for me, honestly, Wayne. Like one of the common issues, I'm going to be real vulnerable here for a second. So we're all business owners here. We understand the complexities that it takes to run a business, grow a business, all the moving pieces, the text, the strategies. Like we're inundated a lot of the time. And for me, as we were growing Speaker Flow, I completely let all of my best practices, my taking care of myself, just completely aside, because I was like, if I just do, we'll see the results. More time equals more productivity, more effort, more money, whatever the more situation was. And it wasn't until I kind of hit like a bottom of sorts where I realized like, I really got to take care of myself. And so started working out more and keeping distance from challenging problems that we were trying to solve. So rather than just trying to sit and work through those problems, I would distance myself and try and make space for things. And then all of a sudden, I mean, maybe an hour or two goes by of that trance state where you're working out or you're sitting by a lake or whatever it might be, and you just have a solution all of a sudden to that problem. And it wasn't, I mean, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't until those experiences that I realized that distancing yourself from the things that you're thinking about and mulling over and giving yourself space, I mean, it quite literally transforms your behavior with your relationship between yourself and your business or your personal relationships or whatever else that you're working on. And I never really correlated that was because of a trance-like state, becoming the thinker of that thought rather than the doer of it. That was really concrete for me.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that, because that makes so much sense, and it also validates like so many of the experiences that the people that I work with is that they're so inundated with more and doing it that they forget about what's important, or the fact that there's this holistic nature. Say, for instance, health. Yeah. If you don't have the vibrancy and the energy flowing through your veins and beaming you in the moments that you need to be dealing with stuff, then you're going to just let go, that you're just going to give up more. And it's going to lead to one of two things, a ton of frustration or burning.
Yep.
Right. And so I completely relate to that whole aspect. And there's a lot of people that, over COVID here that I've coached, and they're in this stressed out or overwhelmed state. And they realize that if they just do more, then that will disappear. And actually, they're fighting their own state of flow, that own state of alignment, where they have to take that space. They have to, even something as simple as closing your eyes and starting to see where you want to be and who you need to become. Most people don't do that because they're taking all the past and they're reliving it over and over and over. And if you look at some of the greatest thinkers in terms of the innovators and the creators, and you ask them, ultimately, it's going to come down to that they have a bigger vision of their future than of their past. They're continually making their future vision greater than their past. And that's why sometimes it's like, I don't even remember what I'm doing because I'm moving forward, right? Like, so it's the little things that make the difference. But first, it's taking time, like you said, to distance yourself from the stuff you're swimming in.
I think that there's a sort of a natural tendency that, especially entrepreneurs, but I think a lot of people in a lot of different instances in life have, where it feels like taking time to step back and let yourself detach from all the stuff feels like, I don't know, almost like quitting, like we're giving up when facing a challenge or a difficult thing. And I think the reality is that's just not true. I mean, everything that you just said indicates that when things get really tough, sometimes that may be the best time to take a step back and see how you can look at things a little bit differently, right? It almost makes me think of that the cliche of shower thoughts, right? Like you're in the shower doing nothing and all of a sudden you get the burst of inspiration. And it's because like for at least that moment, you're detaching yourself from the day-to-day stuff. And regardless of whatever challenges or difficulties or problems are going on, like that's not the thing that you're consumed by, let's say. Am I like hearing you correctly? Is that analogy right from your eyes?
It is, because most of us have been conditioned, especially in the Western world, that we need to be busy. We need to be busy for the sake of being busy. Because busy also has a reward to it. It's a status symbol. Yet the real reward should be joy. Yeah. And so asking people, okay, being busy, how much joy do you experience in that? So that's a great litmus test. I think, it's a new model of how we're thinking. And if you look at some of the best companies and the greatest, most productive companies, they take a lot of time for their employees to be in that creative state, to be in that natural state where they aren't swimming in fighting their self-imposed limitations. Now, I'm not saying anything against effort. Effort is like extremely important. But you think about the amount of effort people go into when they say, well, I want to build my business, but I just don't have the money. I just don't have the time. They completely contradicted themselves. And so either one of two things have to change. They have to change the way they're thinking, or they have to let go of what they want. Because ultimately, if you think about it, like, when are you going to have more time, or when are you going to have more money? It happens now. You make it happen. So I talk about like people getting extremely aligned, like stop the grind, because the grind is usually people fighting themselves, and get super aligned, and those self-care practices and meditating and moving the body, that will exponentially accelerate your performance and what you're creating. But a lot of times people won't let themselves take a break. I had a client that he grew up and his dad was always busy. So he equated, and this is how we form beliefs. He equated that you have to be busy in order to be successful. You can't even take a break. So here was a fellow I'm coaching that wanted to become healthy. And yet at the same time, he's doing workouts, but he's beating himself up because he won't let himself recover. And we also know that sleep and recovery is one of the most profound things in getting yourself to grow. So the logic is there too. It's just like, if people examine like their patterns, like how is that working out for them? It'll always lead back to internally. They got to transform from the inside out.
Oh, I love what you said about that. I'm curious. I want to sort of tangent here, because what we're talking about right now is this like state of stepping away, like sleeping, meditating, things like this that give us a break from the hustle, right? But I know for you, like we were stalking your Instagram a little bit, and it looks like you've been running some stairs lately, which is a real challenging thing. So I'm curious, like doing difficult things like that, does that have a role to play in it as well? A more active means of, stepping away from the grind or the challenges of everyday life?
Yeah, like I have a remember tool that I teach people, where it's like an acronym. MEMB is, and then R and ER on the end. It's movement energizes my body. Movement energizes my being. So the greatest sense of, when you were talking about the shower analogy, one of the greatest experiences that I have in regards to downloading ideas and coming up with creative ideas and just feeling overall inspired is when I'm running. And so when I'm doing stairs, it's almost like I don't look at it as like I have to do this. It's like, this is such a ritual for me, because I know I'm going to stay in shape. I'm going to feel good. I'm going to be optimized. But plus all these ideas, like I run with my phone and I'm like writing down all these ideas. So I've linked the fact that I go out there, which I did 30 years ago, training for wrestling. And that discipline has now translated into something as a profound activity that's like sacred for me to do. So you see, you can hear how important it is for me. I don't do it because I should be doing it. I do it because I've linked so many great meanings to that. And the fact that I can do stairs in 20 minutes and I've done my workout, wow, that's awesome. It's leveraging my time too. So I also think that when you do something really hard, you're actually training yourself to realize that life is going to be hard. And when you go through that, you're going to build up a greater sense of comfort in doing that. Wrestling, I'll tell you right now, when I went to this camp in Oregon called the Iowa Wrestling Camp, it was the toughest 10 days of my life. To this day, I haven't done anything tougher physically, but with physical comes mental. We were working out 4 hours a day. And I'll tell you what, it did one thing. It prepared me for anything else that's tough. Because if people have this false belief that life should be easy, they're setting themselves up for failure. And they're actually sending that out and forecasting that as, well, I'm just going to stay nice and comfortable. That's what it's not about. So that's my answer to that.
That's a great answer. It reminds me of like the Navy SEALs with buds. Like it's the same kind of thing, right? They put these people in extremely difficult circumstances, and physically there's benefits to it, but it's really about the mental preparation for other difficult things that are yet to come, you know? Yeah. And if you can cross that threshold, then when you do run into a challenge, like maybe it's as bad, but maybe it's not. And maybe you're going to be able to quickly and easily and confidently move through that challenge because you've already experienced worse in some ways and self-imposed worse in that instance.
Exactly. I know one of the things in my life is I had an employee steal like a massive amount of money. Like at the time, like it was 6 figures, and wow. It just hit us like, oh my goodness, like, wow. Dealing with that situation, I look at every foundational belief that I had to deal with that. And it came down to how I was programmed and going, what's next? You know, how is this serving me? I mean, sure, I had my moments, of course, but you know, any of those adversities that we all have, and trust me, if you haven't had one of those yet, you will. It may not be stealing, you know, somebody's stealing, but you're going to have that. It's part of life. It's part of the journey. So it's how do you then not think about it? It's how do you program yourself? And that comes from repetitive rituals and routines. Me doing the stairs, you know, when I went on a bike ride with the family the other day, it's like, you know, I just couldn't stop because all of that has prepared me for these other journeys that I'm doing. Yeah.
Well, when you overcome challenges like that, it's empowering. Like you believe in yourself more, which has to strengthen your subconscious beliefs about yourself when you're constantly on that, you know, quote unquote growth edge where you're constantly challenging yourself, or when a new problem arises, you take it head on and just move forward without mulling over it too much. Like, I think that empowers you to feel like confident that you can handle the next problem that comes up. And with that repetition, that more empowerment, and you really are able to start creating the future that you want for yourself. You know, one of the things that I can't help but ask, because I mean, I think about this sometimes, even preparing for this podcast episode, I wonder to myself, like, how do I discover my own subconscious limiting beliefs without having a Wayne in my back pocket letting me know, like, nope, don't do that, Taylor. Think about this differently. You know, so like, how can we, first off, as individuals, discover our own subconscious limiting beliefs? And if so, how can we start to tune into those so that we can then course correct?
For sure. So the simple answer to that is, where in your life are you experiencing the most stress and overwhelm? And so usually one of two things is happening. One, you have some desires that you want to achieve. And let's just put it in the 3 pillars that I think anything can fall into: health, wealth, and relationships. You know, if somebody wants to build a business and they're looking to increase their wealth, their livelihood in there, and there's a lot of stress and overwhelm in there. The stress and overwhelm is just a symptom of the cause of not being aligned. When people can even challenge me on this, saying, well, you know, but you're already at this place. But everybody starts out somewhere. So even a person starting out a business, they have to have a vision, and they have to have the possibility of it happening. And the more that they're thinking in those terms, they're going to be in alignment where they're feeling, and I call it more that flow state. So you're going to feel the joy, the excitement. You're going to feel the empowerment. You're going to feel happy. You're going to feel relief. So a high level of stress and overwhelm is a great place to start to where those self-limiting imposed limitations are of beliefs. So say, for instance, if somebody's using the excuse or self-imposed limitation that there's not enough time and they want to work out, then there's a great deal of stress, because there's a contrast or a counter of, I want to do this, but. So I've just given another tool here, is that when somebody uses the word but, there's also usually a self-imposed limitation, or the word can't, or the word try. So now it goes down to, where are people experiencing that stress and overwhelm? Underneath that are usually their self-imposed limitations. Because if they really want something and they have thoughts that line up against it, they're going to feel a sense of relief.
So I hear you. I'm curious, like, do you find that there are instances where those buts or can'ts are justified? And how do you make that determination, if so? Or maybe they're not ever justified and there's always a solution if we step outside of our frame.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I like to talk about are the two core beliefs that are codes of transformation and that are they've served me in my life, and I use them in the presentations and getting people to shift, is that anything is possible and that you're unlimited. So if somebody wants something bad enough, and I know there's exceptions, people will come at me and they'll say, oh, but how can you play, basketball? How can you be a professional basketball player if you're this?
Sure.
Well, who was the one that Spud Webb, right? That ended up, There's always, like if you put it out there and you think about it and you really want something bad enough, I believe that we all have that soul mission, something within our heart that we want. And so I think anything is possible. You're unlimited. And you can always learn, or you can always leverage and get other people to help you with this. And in that case scenario, what people are looking for is instant gratification right now. They want it now, and they're not willing to put in the time, energy, and effort. So I come from that frame of reference, is that if you're using those words, let's dissect that. And more than likely, 99% of the time, it's going to be something that isn't that important to you if you're not going to commit to it, and that you can always change that self-limiting belief that's there.
Wow. That's a perfect summary, Wayne. I mean, I feel like I've learned so much just in this conversation. This is why we love doing these shows, because we can bring in these amazing stories and experts like yourself to come in and educate us. So thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom, your thoughts. I mean, I feel like I have some tools in my tool belt now to help identify some of these things when they pop up. And I mean, based on everything you're saying, and just based on what I know about your experience too, it's not that everything is always perfect. It's just your ability to work through it and find solutions to greater problems becomes a little bit easier because you have a deeper understanding of yourself. I mean, am I reading that right?
You are. And I will just add to it, Taylor, in the sense that I think that what trips most people up is they think that they should be somewhere else, or they should be farther along, or they should feel a different way. And when people surrender to the fact that they're already whole, complete, and perfect, and I use the word perfect intentionally because a lot of people think perfect is a certain way. It's actually you right now, warts and all, accepting it. And that's why you're here. It wouldn't have been any different, or it wouldn't have, because you are you right now. And accepting that right where you are, ground zero right here, allows you to create from choice, and then go, I'm going to create because I want to, not because I should or have to. So I really believe it's about freedom of creating that business, freedom of, weighing your ideal weight, freedom of picking whoever you want. Like, that's it. So many people are separated just because of their point of how they're orienting where they're at.
Wow. Super insightful stuff, Wayne. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Austin's over there applauding, rightfully so. As you know, Wayne, we're all about creating value for our audience, which you have done tremendously here today. But what are some of the things you're working on right now that our listeners can benefit from?
For sure. So we have, my wife and I have created what we call the 21-day subconscious reset challenge. Cool thing about it, it's for anyone that wants to better themselves or handle the challenges or hit some of their big goals. And it really helps people reset the subconscious to do just that, to, deal with those self-imposed limitations and own your confidence. And the cool thing is it's 21 days, but it's only 10 minutes a day of these short lessons with a transformational task. The results have been profound. The website is there in regards to the link there. So it is something that we've already had hundreds of people come through. And if it resonates in terms of what I've said today, then we'd love to have you on it for sure.
Certainly. Yeah. We'll make sure those links are in the show notes. So everyone be sure to go check that out. And if you like this episode, don't forget to rate it, like it, subscribe to it. And if you want more awesome resources like this, go to speakerflow.com/resources. Thank you so much for chiming in. I just wanted to take a second to thank our sponsor, Auxbus. Auxbus is the all-in-one suite of tools you need to run your podcast. And it's actually what we run here at Speakerflow for Technically Speaking. It makes planning podcasts simple. It makes recording podcasts simple. It even makes publishing podcasts to the masses simple. And quite honestly, Technically Speaking wouldn't be up as soon as it is without Auxbus. Thank you so much, Auxbus. And if you are interested in checking Auxbus out, whether you're starting a podcast or you have one currently, get our special offer, auxbus.com/speakerflow, or click the link below in our show notes.
Thanks for tuning in today. Check the show notes for more info and see you next time. Later.